Good afternoon, everybody. Delighted to be welcoming you to the first panel of Athena 2021. Joined by Rebecca Saw, Hannah Blair, Steve Dann, and our very own Will Knight, who will be facilitating the session. So I will pass over now and let him do the introductions.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Impact of a Virtual World on Virtual Reality. So today we're joined with Hannah, Rebecca, and Steve, and I think probably start off by doing a quick round table for yourselves to quickly introduce yourselves. So Hannah, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Hannah Blair. I'm a front-end developer at Hopin currently, and I've done a few projects in virtual reality, and I'm currently working on a startup called VR Calm, which is combating mental illness using virtual reality.
Fantastic. And Rebecca?
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm a developer. I use lots of different technologies, and I'm especially interested in the space between storytelling and technology.
Fantastic. And Steve?
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Dann. I'm the chairman of Medical Realities. Medical Realities does immersive training in the medical and healthcare field.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for everyone quickly introducing themselves, and yeah, we're here to talk about VR as an industry, and obviously how it's obviously a very emerging technology. And on the space, I am have to admit one of those ones who did buy an Oculus in lockdown. So I've also been recently immersed in the world of VR. But we're really keen today to explore of the different uses of VR and how it can be utilized obviously in new technologies, and obviously how it can have an impact from social situations and startups and medical uses, etc., and general well-being. So we've got a few questions, and then we're going to keep it sort of fairly open, sort of have an open discussion, so we can all get everyone's inputs. But I think we want to start with yourself, Hannah, because I know obviously you've done a lot of work in the past, and I'm aware of VR Calm. Obviously, we've met before and discussed about that, and obviously the work you do with dementia. And I think obviously with everything that's gone on in the last 12 months, and obviously everything that's happened, obviously I think everyone's mental health is certainly been well discussed and documented, and how it's impacted it. But quite keen to hear from you, Hannah, sort of how VR can impact that, and how it can improve mental health, and obviously the uses that you've seen it, and how it can impact it going forward. So yeah, over to you.
Yeah, sure. So it's been an interesting 12 months, that's for sure. It's been quite a challenge for VR Calm as a company, as you can imagine. So the premise of VR Calm is that we're combating isolation using interactive virtual reality experiences. And the initial premise of it was to help seniors, especially those in care homes, because they don't get to go outside whenever they want, and they're constrained by family visitations if they do go outside, and that can happen not very often sometimes for some people. And virtual reality was the perfect sort of way of helping with that, because we could just bring in a bunch of headsets for them, and the care homes could sort of facilitate those sessions, and they could pretend as if they're sort of in an outdoors world or somewhere totally different to where they would normally be if they're in a care home, and get to really like stimulate their minds and feel like they're outdoors again. And that can really, scientifically speaking, can really trick your brain into thinking you're actually there, and that has a really good impact on your mental health, being in the outdoors. But as you can imagine, yeah, the last 12 months have been pretty difficult. So just before the pandemic started, we had run a trial with a test group of about 30 people with dementia, which was really interesting for us. We got some great feedback, and we were ready for the next round of testing after some product iteration. And unfortunately, it sort of had to come to a halt, because going into care homes just is not a possible thing for us right now, especially given the sort of the passing over of virtuality headsets for seniors is quite risky too. So yeah, we had to sort of put that on pause for a moment and sort of have a rethink about how we're going to go ahead. What we're doing now is we're sort of pivoting. We're going to sort of we're focusing more on product development as opposed to testing right now. We're sort of thinking a little bit more about our demographic, because while going into care homes and helping seniors with virtuality isn't realistic right now, or at this moment in time anyway, it's definitely the sort of the upside of this ordeal is that it's amplified the need for it. So more and more people are realizing they're feeling isolated when we're stuck in our own homes and not able to go outside. It's having a massive impact on our mental health, not just seniors, but for everybody. And VR can really help with this. And it can be a little bit counterintuitive, because if people become addicted to VR, that's also a big problem, because that stops them from going outside. And we don't want that to happen at all. So if somebody has the chance to go outside, we want to encourage that. But this is just a way of combating the situations where they want to and people cannot, especially people that are vulnerable. So this year for us has been a lot of research, product development. We've got a little bit of funding this year through a governmental program to help support what we're doing, which is great. And yeah, so going ahead, we are sort of creating another experience as well in tandem with another company, which would be great. But that's all I can say about it for now. But it's going to be very exciting. I mean, I'm a bit more positive about this as we come out of this pandemic, and that, as you said, Will, like you bought an Oculus Quest because, I mean, during a pandemic, like a lockdown, that's a great opportunity to give that a go. And I think this technology is becoming cheaper. I mean, it's not accessible for everybody, but it's becoming much more accessible. People can try out meditation experiences. They can try out exercise experiences. There are just so many really cool VR games that you can play right now, which all in all, you wouldn't think they would, but they're really good for your mental health in certain situations. So I mean, just going outside and exploring like a natural environment it can be so much more than you think it is for your personal health.
I think just my own experience, obviously using the Oculus when I first got it, I hadn't seen my friends for a long time, and we all just sort of met in this room, and like it was so surreal, because we were all sort of there chatting in this world and got our headsets on, and just as if it was just the normal sort of setting, and you do get sucked into this world. And we went to this area where we got in the Millennium Falcon, was walking around the Millennium Falcon, sat in the cockpit, just having a chat, and it was such a weird, surreal experience, but brilliant, because, and I said to my wife afterwards, but that was like such, able to go into this world and actually go and interact, social with my friends, and not just on WhatsApp or on a call, but actually being as well with them. So yeah, but equally what you said there, it can get addicted. And I think the only thing where it stops me possibly get addicted to it is I get a bit motion sickness if I'm in it a bit too long. I start to feel a little bit queasy. So
probably
yeah,
not that.
I was going to say, Rebecca and Steve, have you got any thoughts on sort of that as well? Sort of, how, the mental health issue of VR, and sort of how that can impact and obviously make a big difference, especially in times of today.
Well, I think one thing people overlook with virtual reality and mental health is they see it sort of as video game consoles where you're just sitting down and sort of moving your fingers and not much else. But actually, there's lots of games that are virtual reality games that you're moving around quite a lot. So I've started using my VR headset to exercise. And, I still go out on walks, but really I'm playing Beat Saber a lot of the time to try and get myself moving in a day. So I think that's a really fab overlooked benefit of virtual reality.
Yes, and I think also the sort of I've seen a lot of people actually sort of are really sort of exploring the world in virtual reality while they're actually being locked down at home. So I think that this has impacted a lot of people. I know companies like Applied VR in America have used that technique to help people with long stay problems in hospitals, for instance. So yeah, I think that really the pandemic has increased people's awareness of what you can do in virtual reality and immersive technologies going forward.
So I think, yeah, my a friend of mine, I think I've not experienced this yet, but I think there's an app or somewhere you can go around the Louvre, the museum, and sort of explore you know, so where we haven't sort of been able to go out there and visit museums, and you know, the fact you can then, you know, go and explore it in that virtual world, I think is you know, and obviously with, you know, I don't know, obviously you mentioned at the start, Hannah, obviously the cost implications, because it's not, obviously it is fairly expensive technology. Is it like, are there, you know, obviously I've bought an Oculus, I know how much it spent, so I know what the cost of that was, and it was about £300. Is there, you know, how do we make it more accessible? Like, how do we, is there cheaper alternatives? You know, get in your phones and put it in those goggles. How does it work at the moment? You know, do we? Yeah, I'll pass it to yourselves.
I think that's probably looking at it sort of back to front, because I think that really you can sort of get certain experiences on Google Cardboard initially, but I think people want to sort of get really good experiences in virtual reality, especially, and really you actually have to pay the money to get the headsets. But it's a bit like when things are available on the headsets that actually make sense to lots of people, then it would be like a mobile phone. Mobile phones are expensive, but people don't mind paying for them. So I think it's going to be exactly the same thing with virtual reality headsets.
I think as well, when the world opens up again and we can actually go into places in person, there's virtual reality experiences that you might be in your shopping centre that you can go and try, or at film festivals or places like that. There's a couple of theatre companies that I've seen where, while you're waiting for the main theatre show, they have a VR headset that's an experience linked to their theatre show. So it's not that you have to buy an individual headset if you ever want to experience virtual reality, and something that you can do more in person, where you either might pay nothing or you might pay a couple of pounds for one experience.
Yeah, just to
I
add
think,
on to
yeah,
that,
you're right. I went.
I was going to say, to add on to that, I mean, it's for people who aren't able to get a virtual reality headset, be that an Oculus Quest, be that a Google Cardboard. There are still ways of experiencing what people experience in 360. And just as one example is, YouTube have a lot of 360 videos online. And while you're not, viewing it in a headset, you can still see what people are seeing. And lots of people also live stream like their virtual reality, like Rec Room, for example, when they're sort of on the Oculus Quest, they do stream that online, so people can see what they're seeing. And it's a very sort of easy way of dipping your toes into the water as to what people do see when they're in a headset, because people have no idea when you've never experienced it. I know when I first experienced VR, I didn't know what to expect really. And web VR is becoming a lot more, it's growing a lot, and that's a way for people to access it when they don't have a headset.
Yeah, it is, and it is. You're right. I think the first time you experience it I found it quite a mind-blowing sort of experience. I didn't realize how immersive you become, and how, it is truly remarkable. And unfortunately, my 6-year-old son he came across it the other day and was dancing with a robot in the room, and he was just, luckily the headset is a bit too big for him, so it falls off. So that's where his interest in it sort of is fairly limited. But yeah, no, it's quite. I'd be able to then watch it on my phone and see what he's experiencing, which was quite a fun part. Well, just touching on that, Hannah, obviously I know you work at Hopin. Obviously what a year for Hopin, growing from strength to strength, and obviously virtual events, and I've asked about this as well. It's been talked about in that events, obviously online, but incorporating VR into events, and how you can then transform to actually in the event via that platform. Is that something that's you don't have to say if Hopin are exploring that right now for the trade secrets, but as a whole in the industry, is that something that's emerging and being discussed at the moment, looked at?
I'm quite careful about what I can talk about Hopin wise, but I mean, it's definitely something I would love on the roadmap. That's not really sort of, I haven't been in those discussions anyway. I mean, but the point of Hopin, really, we're really trying to sort of connect people, and that's sort of Which are trying to amplify networking, replicate what we did at conferences normally in pre-pandemic world. And yeah, virtual reality would be a great way of amplifying that sort of that connection that you make with other people. But Hopin wise, it's not on the roadmap right now. It'd be cool though. I would definitely like that to happen.
For sure. Great. No, yes, sorry for I just want to now maybe turn to you, Steve. It's a question here to see the work that you've done. So how have companies like Medical Realities had to adapt, if at all, to a more virtual world? And has there been an opportunity for more people to look at using VR for medical training, or have you changed the approach? If that's
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. I mean, I think that it's actually sort of affected us an awful lot, both for good and bad. Right now, Medical Realities was originally designed to actually sort of do training and education for medical students, but now we actually do much more. We actually sort of train nurses, doctors, and surgeons as well. But in the case of medical students, for instance, they haven't been able to access any actual in-hospital work or any actual operating theatre work for over the last 12 months. So there's a whole lot of medical students right now that are actually missing out on a large part of their medical training. And it's really through companies like Medical Realities that we can actually sort of help fill that gap, because they can experience what it's like to do ward rounds. They can experience what it's like to do medical training in surgical operating theatres, for instance. So that's it. So that's been a very positive aspect, and we're going to sort of increase on that sort of thing that we're doing in order for people to be able to connect, no matter where they are and when they're available to actually sort of do their sort of training or education. So it's been a sort of, let's say, double-edged sword. We haven't been able to sort of film any new operations for the last year for exactly the same reason. But we're really raring to go and sort of get back into the stream of things to actually sort of catch up on what we've missed out in over the last 12 months. But it's been very positive for us, because we've actually seen an uptake in people wanting to use immersive technologies like Medical Realities to help in their training and education.
And is it quite a commonly used approach in today's age, or is it still obviously quite an innovative approach? But how's the sort of the uptake and people using it, institutions, etc.?
Yes, it's a sort of I think that this actually goes back to what we were talking about, touched on a little bit earlier, about sort of headsets and things like that. I think it's actually sort of getting people to have good access to headsets. And we're working with organisations like Health Education England to, in actual fact, overcome that. And we've got a project that we're working on now, along with other VR companies, that's actually coming into fruition over the next few months, which will make it a lot easier for hospitals and trusts to access training and education modules, for instance.
I think it's a really interesting concept as well. So I think as Rebecca said at the start, we quite often associate VR in gaming, but obviously, the result, the applications that it can be used to and training is obviously a key and obvious one as well. Especially as we're now working in a pretty much remote world, and you could train ultimately anyone, anything. Obviously, this has been used in the medical world, but any job, any training, you put this headset and go into the head office and walk around, or get access to simple things like administrative tasks, but obviously the operational tasks. So is that has anyone else seen any different sort of uses or an uptake maybe in training vocation as a whole with VR?
It's not something I've seen personally. I've only read about it, but I've seen or I've read about this company that were using virtual reality headsets to work with people who had post-traumatic stress disorder, because part of the treatment for PTSD is taking that person back to those memories and helping them kind of reclassify their brains to reclassify those memories. So what virtual reality can do is instantly take them back to that point where the brain sort of saved everything soaked in fear, and work around that and work through those emotions. Yeah, what an amazing way to use technology to help people.
Yeah.
I think
No,
also
it's-
from a training point of view, Will, it's a sort of, it's, yeah, as you say, it's useful for training anybody, anything. As I say, it could be training somebody how to perform an operation, but also it could be training somebody how to assemble a jet engine or service a motor car, or literally do anything. And one of the fascinating things that we've found is that the usefulness and how effective the actual training is in virtual reality, the retention rate of what people are taught by actually working in virtual reality is 75 to 80% retention rate. And the only thing better than doing that is having a one-to-one mentor with you all the time. So as a training and educational tool, it's really unsurpassed.
Yeah, I think it's going to be certainly, I think we'll see it. Obviously, going to be a huge investment into technology companies that were utilizing it for training, and as well as obviously the recreational things of the future. And before, obviously, when we started about that, I was going to mention, obviously, I went to the centre in Wembley Park about a year and a half ago. The sort of the proper VR gaming, and that was incredible. And I remember, talking about different worlds that you could take you to, and sort of say, it's that's the sort of the real immersive part of it. So I want to turn to you now, Rebecca. So obviously we've just talking more generally now about Athena, obviously the event, which is looking to inspire a generation of women and sort of non-binaries into the industry. Why do you think now is the right time to really tackle this key subject, and how can immersive technology sort of help impact that and make a difference? And keen to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I think now is a really, really exciting time in virtual reality and in tech as a whole. In virtual reality specifically, the rules are still being written at the moment. So if you're a creative or an inventor or someone who just has ideas, any other medium, you kind of need to have a little bit of background knowledge. If you're going to make a TV program, you sort of need to know what's been done before you. And there are best practices within virtual reality, but they're still being written. It's a really exciting time where you can actually make your mark on something that people might look to years and years later. So it's a real opportunity, I think, to get involved in this medium which has potential that we don't probably even understand yet. We know a lot of the advantages of virtual reality. We know all the things it can do, the things that Hannah and Steve have been talking about. But there's still more potential, and there's still things that we don't know yet about it, especially within storytelling. And I think tech as a whole, it's a little bit like magic, because if you have an idea, you can make it possible. Which to sort of say, but when you're in that experience, when you're going, oh, wouldn't it be really cool if I could make something where I could play table tennis with my friends without being in the same room? That's possible. So yeah, it's just a really exciting time, and especially for people who maybe hadn't considered tech, who'd maybe just seen tech or virtual reality as, something that's a bit, nerdish, or those kind of stereotypes, where actually virtual reality is just a tool that you can do so much with. And what I'm really interested in at the moment is virtual reality and storytelling. So some of the experiences, I've been to a theatre show in virtual reality, I've done sort of a murder mystery with my friends, and those experiences are completely different to if I'd done them outside of virtual reality. So yeah, firstly, it's just such an exciting time to make a mark. There's so many interesting people, talented people doing really cool stuff. There's also really great communities based on, social media, Twitter, Discord. So if you are not an artist, but you want some really great art, you can find people to reach out to and collaborate with. Yeah, so it's fab. It's such an exciting time. And what I'm really passionate about is showing that to people who maybe hadn't considered virtual reality something they could be a part of.
And I think I'm turning to you now, Hannah, because obviously, you are you only graduated a couple of years ago, but you've sort of gone into VR straight away, pretty much. How did that come about for you? Like, at what point were you exposed to VR as the world that you wanted to venture into?
Yeah, so it kind of happened sort of luckily, I suppose. I mean, it wasn't. So I did computer science as my degree, but it was by no means as part of my curriculum at all. Given the fact that it's very novel, you wouldn't expect it to be a module in university at that point. But I suppose I had an initial interest in it from a gaming perspective. I was like, oh, that's so cool! I can just like play Beat Saber. Like, what is this game? And it looked really good. And I definitely wanted to give that a go. And luckily, for my university dissertation, they're very open-minded about what projects you can work on. And I sort of took that as an opportunity to explore something very, very different. It very much helped that I had understood the foundations of programming from university, which helped me lead into the technology side, the development side of VR. It was using C# and Unity just as something that's for people to know if they wanted to explore it. But that was very new to me. So I just kind of took it upon myself to learn online, because there are lots of resources online to help you with that. At that time, I suppose it's like 2018, which I ventured into it. Resources were a little bit limited, so it was quite hard to pick it up. Yeah. But now, as of now, there are so many resources online, YouTube videos, documentation. It's pretty easy to get into. I suppose the only barrier for entry really with VR is getting the headset itself. Because it is expensive for some people, and that's quite tough to get. It's quite tough to get hold of, especially when it's all sold out in some places as well. And my university I found a problem, which was the isolation found in care homes, which was something that sort of inspired by my great grandmother, who was in a care home for people with dementia. And I thought I could solve that with VR and make that my dissertation project with the university. So they funded a VR headset, which helped me get it in the first place, which was really helpful. So from then on, I built out a project with this problem and used this solution. And following that, I got some funding from Sky, which helped me get into that project a lot more. And I sort of made a startup around it, which was great. And I got some traction and I found a co-founder, and it kind of snowballed from there, really. So yeah, I suppose like creating a worthwhile project from a university dissertation really, really helped me, because I wanted to build something with some kind of meaning that I could take into the real world after. And that definitely helped making it my uni dissertation. I didn't realize how much it would grow following that. And I definitely couldn't have anticipated making a whole startup around it, but it's been a really cool journey. And it was quite a lot of fortune involved, and the support from Sky definitely helped as well.
Yeah. Just got a quick question that popped up in the panel, which I think is quite relevant here. So it's from Janet, who's saying, could the care home residents' family create their own footage? Is that something that's capable of them to then take that in, and is that being used at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, just at the top of my head, people can quite easily, with a 360 camera, they can sort of film what's around them. There are lots of 360 cameras on the market, and they're becoming much more cheaper. As of recent anyway. And they can just film something in 360, and then you can fairly easily, number one, upload it to YouTube, which is 360 compatible. And then using one of the headsets, you can go on the YouTube app and look at that footage. So that's one way of going about it. From a development perspective, you can upload 360 footage as well into Unity, as I mentioned earlier. And do that. So yeah, there are a few avenues you can go down with that. And in terms of VR Calm, it's not really the way we're going down, because we sort of want an interactive virtual world as opposed to footage, but it's definitely something that people could benefit from and try themselves.
That's it. And I just want to quickly come back to you, Rebecca. You mentioned there about the theatre experience of this, obviously the storytelling element. How did that work? Like, were you in the theatre with the headset, or was it sort of at home watch in the theatre show? Yeah.
I've done a couple of different ones. So I've done one which was a whole theatre show in 360 video, so it's just me sitting on my headset. I've seen one where it was some 360 footage that you would go into the headset and watch in the lobby waiting to go into a live theatre event. And then I was part of a team that brought a live theatre virtual reality escape room to the Tribeca Film Festival. So that was just a mix of everything, honestly. So we had live actors in the room where the audience were asked to put on a headset for a bit, take it off, interact with an actor. Yeah, so that was a real mix of everything.
Yeah, no, it's I've in my previous life I was a training actor once, and that was so it's quite interesting.
Well, that's really interesting, is how actors and the acting community have taken to virtual reality.
Yeah,
And I think they're really vital to each other, is people who understand storytelling and acting and connecting with an audience, and people who understand virtual reality technology, and bringing those two camps together. And I think that's where the magic happens. That's where incredibly interesting and new experiences happen, when you have people with those expertise.
I think it's the arts industry as a whole is one that's been hugely impacted. That they've literally not been able to do their work. Whereas a lot of us have still, we can go home, we can work remotely. To a certain degree, it's business as usual. It's obviously got its challenges, but those in theatre, theatre and music as a whole, I think, film and television, they've found ways to continue that. But it'd be interesting to see what, if there was, more advanced in the technology. I wonder if they could, have been better positioned and ready to sort of, continued, performing on a weekly basis. Obviously, if headsets were more readily available and accessible, because and how that's going to maybe, for the future, like, will it become norm in 5 years' time that we Friday night and we sit there in our homes, put our headsets on, and suddenly we're in the globe watching, Romeo and Juliet. It's that's the
Well, I
future.
think a lot of theatre companies are starting to use this technology and to do some research and development, especially. So I know the Royal Shakespeare Company have done some stuff with virtual reality. I don't know if it's with virtual reality, but it was with augmented reality. And also, it was an experience recently where people could access it through any device, so through laptops, through phones. So it's definitely something that the theatre industry, especially, has realised exists, and are now shaping and working with. But there was a really great theatre experience I did, actually, called The Under Presents, and it was all in virtual reality, and there was one actor who could speak, and all the audience members couldn't speak, but we could wave and move and pick things up, and that was brilliant. That was just so engaging as an experience.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, and say just the filmmaking and stuff of the future, how it impact. Just going to open up a question to all of you here, because I think this is some questions coming in about how you become part of the community if you have no previous experience with VR. And I know you touched on this, Hannah, but maybe go into a little bit more depth now from all of you. Just, for those watching right now, who maybe just starting in the world of being in technology, done some coding, or maybe even, fairly seasoned professional, but they want to get into VR. How do they start? They leave the session today. Where do they go first, and then what's the next steps?
Well, firstly, I think seeing the session today, if they're going to the Athena hack, that's a great way to start. First of all, going to hackathons, knowing those sorts of things. I would say, firstly, you don't need to code to get into virtual reality. It's great, that's one side of it. I'm a coder, I got into virtual reality through coding, but it's not necessary if you're an artist, if you're a storyteller, if you're just a thinker, if you just have an idea. that's perfect. That's great. So yeah, I would say consume as much information about virtual reality as you can. So you don't need a VR headset to do that. You can, like Hannah said, watch YouTube experiences. There's great VR communities on Twitter, on Discord, and yeah, things like the hackathon, things where people are talking about virtual reality. That's a great place to start, and just reach out to people and write your ideas down and chat to anyone you can about them, I would say. In terms of coding, there's some really good places to start on coding. So Code Academy is a fab place. It's a free website, and you can learn loads of different coding languages there. And there's an organization I've worked with before called Code First Girls, who do free coding lessons, which is web development, for women and non-binary students. And that's also a great place to start. So yeah, there's loads of different avenues. Bring your enthusiasm, chat to anyone you can, find anything you can on the internet, and just do it. Like, you don't need permission to start designing a virtual reality experience. You can go and try it.
Yeah.
I also run a meetup group called Augmenting Reality, which has over 7,000 members. It's a little bit in limbo at the moment because we can't meet up anywhere, but it's a sort of, but that's a great way to actually sort of join and actually sort of get in contact with other members. Also, if you're really serious about it, then look at the VR and AR Association. You could actually join that for free if you're an individual, and that's all about sort of promoting what you can do in VR and AR around the world.
Fantastic.
They've all been very, very good answers. I sort of echo again what Rebecca said. Like, the Twitter community sort of helped me get into it in the first place. Really, I joined. I wasn't really always a tweeter for a long time, and then when I started VR, through that medium, through that platform, I found a lot of people in VR. And then from that, I connected with people. I chatted with people about virtual reality, even though I was very much a beginner. I hate to say it, but Clubhouse as well has quite a lot of VR people on there. I mean, Clubhouse is a very new kind of platform, and there are a lot of really good conversations on there. So that's another good place to start if you have access to it. But yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily even need a community to even get started. I think just start sort of, consuming everything you can. There are some awesome books out there now, and great resources. So yeah, just kind of start, and then it'll go from there.
No, and I think as well, obviously, looking at the hack this weekend, I think if anyone was, teams considering, utilizing VR or sort of, is that a route that someone could possibly take this weekend in the hack? Like, sort of creating some concepts that they could get together, over the weekend. Is, where obviously I know you mentioned things like Codecademy and stuff, like obviously the courses, but is there any sort of some like open source or any sort of starting starting blocks to help them build maybe something over the weekend that they could put into a project? Does anyone know about?
Well, one thing with virtual reality is that it uses a lot of the same game engines as sort of traditional games. So Unity, which Hannah mentioned, Unreal, you can build virtual reality experiences in those. Those need a bit of coding knowledge, a bit of game engine knowledge. But again, there's some great, just if you Google Unity beginner tutorial, you'll find a wealth of stuff, honestly. I would say if you're interested in designing a virtual reality experience, but you have no background knowledge, that's fine. Prototype it. Make it not VR with the view to it becoming VR later. Or there is, if you have access to a virtual reality headset, or actually even if you don't, there's a couple of things. So there's a place or an online space called Alt Space VR. And what that is, it's sort of a sandbox where you can create your own worlds and invite people to them. And Mozilla Hubs is a really similar thing that uses WebXR, so that people can access both of those on a virtual reality headset, on a phone, on a laptop. So if you've got an idea for a game, maybe it's not everything that you want your game to do, but you're never going to build that in a weekend anyway. So it's just the idea. It's kind of, and you can drag and drop stuff there to make the idea of what you want to create in VR.
I think that's the thing. I think it's the overall concept, isn't it, of what want it to look like, and obviously those snippets. And I imagine VR Calm, for instance, Hannah, obviously when you started at university, I imagine that was quite a similar route for you, wasn't it? I think is that sort of...
Exactly. I mean, thankfully, there are a lot of tutorials out there that, again, really support you with this process. And I mean, I didn't really know C#, but I knew Java, and the syntax are very similar. So if you learn Java, and there are so many resources out there to help you learn that, then it definitely helps you with that process. One thing I would say is that I mean, VR, when you first open Unity, for example, if anybody downloaded Unity, which is free, the interface is very intimidating, especially for people who aren't technical. And so one kind of segue into VR is maybe exploring augmented reality first, which is really accessible as well. So obviously you just need a laptop, and just a smartphone is fine because you can just prototype something and send it straight to your phone. And that you can download Spark AR, which is, you don't need coding. It's like a sort of a blueprint kind of format, and you just sort of say what actions you want it to do. And there are loads of templates to help you with that. And that's sort of one way of prototyping with VR, but not sort of totally removing yourself from the technical side of things. So you're still prototyping. It's still an interactive thing with your phone, and you can make a 3D world, but instead of it being on a headset, you can just view it through your phone. So that's sort of one stepping stone towards VR that people could consider.
And I guess as well, obviously, the whole thing with the circular economy, obviously it's about reducing waste, sustainability, and reuse. I think, and going back to the training thing, Steve, obviously we talked about that. It's the classic example. This fits perfectly with the circular economy, doesn't it? Because it is all about, reusing training materials that you don't have to have, hiring venues and resources, and it's probably right up there straight away, isn't it?
No, absolutely. I mean, it is all about scalability and also reach. And yes, you're absolutely right. When we started out medical realities, one of the reasons to do it was actually to help democratize training and education. And really, you can do that by actually really sort of leveraging the scalability, because once we've created a training module, that training module can be used over and over again and could be seen by anybody anywhere in the world. So it's a fantastic way of in actual fact looking at sustainability, and meaning that people don't always have to travel miles and miles and miles to actually sort of go to a university or to attend a lecture or anything like that. The actual sort of the training and education can come to them.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So just seeing if we've got any more questions here that have popped up in the channels. So obviously, I'm going to go off tangent here because I'm just going to talk about something which I want to talk about. Wow. So I'm sure most people have seen the film Ready Player X, and you watch it and you're like, oh my God, is this the future and what it is? And, where are we as a technology point of view of where that, where we do become a lot more immersed in that world, and it becomes a bit more of an actual real reality? Like, is that close, and do we want that? We still want to remain active, right? So it's well, you probably know better than all of us. Where are we at the moment, and what could become the new world?
Well, I suppose that actually there are some eminent scientists who actually say that we actually do live in a simulation already. So I think it might be taking a little bit far, but I think when you look at films like Ready Player One, that I think that actually shows part of what the future could be. But I think Rebecca was sort of spot on that we're right at the very start of this, both augmented reality and virtual reality and new mediums, and people actually don't know much about them. If we're looking about it in film and television terms, VR and AR are really still back in the sort of black and white, no sound, hand crank film camera days. We're right at the start of something, and Rebecca's absolutely right. Anybody sort of joining in and sort of getting interested in virtual reality can actually help shape how this actually does sort of spread out in the future. I was completely captivated by it when I first saw it. We were in augmented reality with my company, Amplified Robot, and then got into virtual reality. When a chap called Palmer Luckey virtually reinvented virtual reality in 2012, and actually that was the start of when it actually started to become more accessible. And people saying, well, it should have happened already. There've been articles over the last 10 years saying, oh, virtual reality is dead. No, it's very much alive, and it's actually going through a trajectory exactly the same as any other modern technology, whether that was television or mobile phones or computers. But we're right at the start of something, and it's going to be fascinating to see how things develop in the next few years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Thing is, I'm a bit more opposed to the idea of having Ready Player One come to fruition. That's where VR kind of scares me. I didn't like the film. I should have liked the film, I guess, but I think we are very far away from it. Number one, from an accessibility point of view, which that at one point it'll become more accessible, that's for sure, but I think we're a long way from that. One other technology which is coming onto the scene much more prominently is haptic feedback. We have the introduction of hand tracking, which means you don't need controllers when you're using VR, and you can just interact with things due to the cameras. But haptic feedback is the next step in VR, which will make everything much more realistic. And a few years ago, you had to wear a full-on suit to feel anything when you're interacting with something in the virtual world. But now there are a lot more kind of sleekly designed technologies which allow you to sort of put on some very lightweight gloves, or even possibly even smaller than that, to get that haptic feedback and actually feel something when you touch something. I'm a little bit iffy about how I feel about it. I don't like the feeling of this technology becoming too Ready Player One-y, partly from an ethical perspective, because I mean, technology can be great, but technology can also be really, 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 really bad if it's put in the wrong hands. So as Rebecca said, interestingly, the rules are still being written, and it's great from one perspective, but it's also kind of not. It's you've got to tread carefully, and you don't want to create any experiences which are negative or bad for people, or and there's still that element of empathy that people have to have when they're creating virtual reality experiences, and they have to put the user at the forefront and consider what they're building carefully.
It's that moment in Ready Player One when I think the kids have got their headsets on and they're running down the street in the real world, but fighting in the game, and it's just, and sort of, I say, watching my 6-year-old son playing around, sort of that, it's, it's the difference between they're sitting down playing or standing up and playing. Like, you think is it the lesser of two evils? Then at least they're moving but playing at the same time. But you've got to keep kids active, or everyone active. But that, I think, kids is probably always the biggest concern of getting too engrossed video games at a younger age, and that entertainment side of things. But touch on what you said earlier, Steve, about are we living in this world? I remember watching Matrix when I was 17 or so when it came out. Someone came out and we were mates were like, are we in the Matrix? Yeah, it was that. You start questioning everything, even almost 22 years ago now when it was. Right, we're getting close to time. I've got another question that's come up here about how eco-friendly are the headsets, and is there work being done on that? So I think this goes as probably production as a whole, to sort of mass production, which again comes back into the circular economy about reusing and recycling and making sure we're not wasting. But maybe not just from a production point of view, but I know there's all Bitcoin, obviously, or the whole crypto world is a big topic at the moment. Obviously, that how much carbon emissions it consumes, and it's not it's I guess this is a bigger question just for tech as a whole, really. And obviously the more remote that we become, the more energy we're consuming. So I guess it's an open question to you all, really, sort of the environmental impacts of technology. I know this is going really tangent now. Is this something we should be concerned about? Is it like how do we monitor it, or how do we protect ourselves from it? Feel free to pitch in.
I think in terms of, as I was talking about before, where we can use the immersive technologies to actually, so people don't have to travel some large distances, so that there's an awful lot of ecological impact for good. I don't think it's anywhere we have to worry about a problem about where it's going to take up huge amount of computer resources, and create so much CO2 that Bitcoin does. I mean, I think that really is a problem going forward. But I think that we all have to be sort of very, very careful. The people that work in immersive technologies have to be aware about how powerful it is, both for it has the ability to do amazing things for good, but also it could do amazing things, sort of on a negative side as well. So I think everybody who works in immersive technology has to understand that, because as a training and education or a tool to actually sort of experience things, it can become an incredibly real experience, and your brain sort of can actually switch from thinking that it's in a virtual reality to saying, well, this virtual reality looks like a pretty good reality to me. I'll just stay in that. So it's something that we will have to be aware of. But in terms of doing good for the planet, I think that actual virtual reality and augmented reality is actually going to help rather than hinder.
Yeah, I think as I say, a lot of the training applications and the be able to visit somewhere virtually is a huge impact on that. Obviously, not having to travel and use the resources and use obviously the facilities that come with that. So we've got about just under 10 minutes left of this session. So what I'd quite like to ask now is each of you maybe to a VR experience that you would recommend for everyone to go and, so take into consideration, let's say people have got VR headsets at home or got accessibility to one. Where would you recommend someone to go today to go experience their best sort of representation of VR that's not connected to your work, it's not connected to your, so completely unbiased here, but yeah, keen to hear your thoughts here and where you suggest people should go.
For me, if you're interested in theatre and storytelling within virtual reality, I mentioned it before, but it's called The Under Presents. And it's just a really fantastic way of doing everything differently than you've experienced in virtual reality. So it sort of drops you in without many instructions and just lets you explore, which is fab. And it's something that I would Google and find the community in Twitter and Discord as well. So yeah, the Under Presents has just been massively stand out for me in terms of making something that rewrites the rules. And I'll just do a plug for Beat Saber as well, because that is it's the game that everyone kind of goes, oh, VR, you should try Beat Saber. And it is, because it's unlike anything you've done before. You start dancing in the rhythm, it's like playing an instrument, and again, it's great to exercise. So those are my two.
It's very super addictive as well, isn't it? I always find when you're playing, when I was playing with Darth Vader the other night on the lightsaber, and I thought, I look so cool in here, I'm this Jedi, but then like I see my friend do it, and how much of an idiot he looks out. So when you're in the world, you think you're like a hero, but outside the world, you just look like an embarrassing dad at my, So, but yeah, to you now, Hannah, top tips where people should go.
From a gaming perspective, which is how I got into VR in the first place, I think Super Hot VR is also a very good game. Yeah, it's also just like shooting people, but it's a cool game. It sort of like plays with physics as well, which is quite cool. But more from a social good perspective, there's a really cool experience which I don't think is limited to like an Oculus Quest headset. You can watch a video of it as well, but it's called Tree. It's won a few awards, and it kind of follows the growth of a tree in a rainforest, and it has sort of an emotional effect on you from an environmental perspective, and sort of you have some empathy for the tree, and it's like growing, and then it sort of meets its fate being an amazing tree in the rainforest. And I really appreciate experiences which sort of change your mind a little bit and things. It sort of gives you a new perspective on something that you would never see before. So as I said, I quite like that it's number one, accessible from just YouTube as well, and number two, it's great from I mean, yeah, it creates an emotional experience for people, and that's always that's the goal, really, to really change people's mind and how they behave in their day-to-day life for the benefit of the world eventually. So yeah, that's my two recommendations.
And we'll make sure to post these in the chat as well if Alex is watching. And Steve, yourself, what would you recommend?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think if you can get hold of an Oculus and explore the sort of Facebook world that they're building, there are some really interesting sort of areas there. Beat Saber is definitely one of the things that everybody can get into it and try it. I think it's also interesting that a lot of the more popular games are really sort of one-person shooter games, but that was just like gaming. So it's a sort of there's a very good one called Alex, which I highly recommend to get into. But for one of the more sort of abstract ones, which is really interesting and probably a bit more cerebral, is a thing called Monument Valley. So you can look at that inside inside Facebook and the Oculus library. So those are the type of things I would urge people to look out for.
Fantastic. Thank you for everyone's insights there. I think we'll post all those links there because I think it's quite important, because I say there's so much content out there, and I think it's sometimes useful to hear people's top tips there. So well, no, look, I think it's been a really fascinating session. I find it a really interesting subject I could talk about this all day long. And obviously we are restricted to time here. So, but thank you so much. It's really going to be quite exciting, interesting to see if anyone comes up with any ideas or some creative projects this weekend that they could utilize VR and how that could be applied in the circular economy. I think we've definitely covered how it could be really well utilized, obviously within training and within in the world of the medical world, and obviously what Hannah doing, and the storytelling as well that obviously Rebecca mentioned there a lot, which I think has so many uses. But obviously we just need to make sure we don't go to Ready Player One and still remain in the real world. If we really are, maybe we are, which is in the Matrix, who knows. But no, well, thank you for everyone, for all your time, and much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Will.
Cheers. Bye-bye, everyone.